Three things to watch from the next Fed chair. The Federal Reserve is back in the news as Donald Trump is reportedly nominating Kevin Warsh for Fed chair. Warsh, who has a reputation as someone who does his homework and builds consensus in making decisions, is expected to focus on three main things: interest rates, forward guidance coupled with new economic modeling, and shrinking the Fed's $6 trillion balance sheet. On two of those, we think he's broadly reasonable. On the third, we think he may be wrong. Hi, I'm Richard Vague with Tycos. On interest rates, President Trump wants them down, while Warsh has leaned toward using higher interest rates for combating high inflation. It's hard to imagine Trump would have chosen Warsh if there was not some sort of tacit understanding that he would be receptive to lowering interest rates, and Warsh has helpfully telegraphed a belief that artificial intelligence will bring such productivity that lower rates won't bring high inflation. We like lower rates since they may bring some relief to household borrowers, especially if new Fed cuts bring lower mortgage rates, though that's hardly a given as we've shown. Note that we don't see any evidence that low rates bring high inflation. In fact, higher rates likely bring higher inflation, since inflation is high prices and higher rates makes things more expensive. So we're okay with Warsh here. On forward guidance and new economic modeling, Warsh has criticized, quote, too frequent Fed communications. We don't mind that since the Fed's guidance has been so notoriously unreliable. Think 2007. And we do think new economic forecasting modeling is in order. He has questioned the Phillips curve, for example. Fresh thinking here would be more than welcome since, shockingly, the economic model the Fed uses is largely unchanged from one it used when it failed to predict the GFC. We don't love all the modeling directions he espouses, but we do like the idea of shaking things up. But there's one area where we think Warsh is perhaps a little off base, and this is a big one, though technical and arcane. He has criticized the Fed's, quote, bloated $6 trillion balance sheet and articulated a strong desire to shrink it. Here's the story. Up until the GFC, the Fed's balance sheet was under $1 trillion, and today it's $5.7 trillion. In fact, in 2021, it reached as high as $8.9 trillion. It got from $1 trillion to $6 trillion via the open market operations it used to help rescue the economy in both the GFC and COVID, the very purchase of securities from the private market we discussed last week. By definition, that has increased the money supply by $5 trillion, and that money supply is now $22.6 trillion, which in the mind of Warsh and others is part of what boosts inflation. But we don't worry here either, since that expansion did not bring high inflation during the period of its greatest excess, which was 2008 to 2016, or even in the years that immediately followed. There's another reason not to worry about the size of the Fed's balance sheet. Compared to other big central banks around the globe, the Fed's size and ratio to GDP is actually the smallest in the world, as you see here. And shrinking it may actually harm the economy slightly by removing liquidity. So there's absolutely no need to do anything on this, and our guess is that Warsh will end up doing very little here. As a footnote, the Fed pays interest on the reserves that are created as a consequence of this expanded balance sheet, and we think it could save some money in an important way if it were to discontinue paying interest. But that's another subject for another day. But we do want to make one final point. The Fed's power is vast. There's no question about that. But even with that vast power, it's not quite as vast as people routinely assume. In a world shaped by innovation, demographics, trade, tariffs, corporate behavior, consumer psychology, and geopolitics, it's difficult to make an empirically based case that the Fed can do all that much to directly reduce inflation or increase employment. At best, it is only one factor among many. So, at the end of the day, Warsh appears to have reasonable goals solid qualifications, and ample relevant experience. In all probability, he's a reasonable choice. Thanks.